Hello everyone! In today's video I'm going to demonstrate for you how you can animate color, saturation and brightness in Procreate Dreams. In fact, I'm going to demonstrate two types of animation. The first one is going to be methodical and it's going to be keyframing, which is extremely important because if the second method failed you, you can always go back and fix the keyframes using the first method. However, the second one, you might want to sit down when you watch that part because it might blow your mind. Especially given that this is just a mobile app and being able to do these techniques, I was very impressed, but it might just be me. Well, you let me know. Anyhow, so this is the project that I have. Remember, tapping 4 fingers is gonna go back to the interface. So anytime you wanna preview the full, you click 4 fingers. And for this practice here, I'm going to focus only on the lava area. If you want to apply coloration, or if you want to modify the coloration, the brightness or saturation, how do we do that? In my very first video I demonstrated how we can change the scale and position. So if you go and click on the action trigger here, you go to move and then move and scale, and that's going to allow us to animate the move and scale. And instead I'm going to go to the action trigger here, the button, tap and then go to filters. You have this thing that is called HSB, hue, saturation and brightness. Let's click on that. If you were to change the hue, hue is a different word for saying color. So if I were to change the hue, as you can see, it changes the color of that lava. Okay? If I change the saturation all the way down, it's going to make it grayscale. All the way up, it's going to make it really saturated. And when it comes to brightness, all the way down is going to make it dark, and then all the way up, it's going to overexpose it. So how do we animate these properties? You will notice here that as I move the timeline, you will notice this keyframe. Anything that you add from the list, meaning if I click here and go and change, for instance, move and scale, then that would create the move and scale keyframe. And let me answer one of the questions that I got on my previous video. How do we do distortion? You click here on the action trigger, you go to move and then distort, which will allow you to make some really cool distortions. So as you can see here, the icon design helps us on knowing what keyframe track we are on. Now let's say I just want to delete those keyframes completely. Click and hold and then delete, move and scale. It would tell you exactly what you're deleting. So I'm going to keep the hue and saturation and I'm going to delete the distort. Now, going to the first frame of hue and saturation. If I go all the way to the 10th second, notice here if you move the trigger up, it's going to give you back that action trigger. But if you move it down to the track where we have created that hue and saturation, then it would give you that icon telling you that this is now going to be a key for hue and saturation. Cool. Remember, it's very tricky. If you're used to different software, it's usually you make changes and it would automatically save a keyframe for you, but it's not the case in Procreate Dreams. Instead, before you make the change on the hue and saturation, click to create a keyframe. And now you can make changes. So let me add some saturation and brightness. Now, if I hit play, as that video is going to play along, it's going to increase that hue and saturation. Let's say you made that animation and you feel like it's a little too long. I want to make it to be noticeable more quickly. You can click and hold and move that key. So now it's really straightforward. You go forward and say, this time I want to lower the brightness. So if you want to give it that kind of glow effect, this would be the way, through brightness. But remember, any change you want to make, you have to make sure that you click on the key. Once you tap, it's going to create a keyframe for you. So all you need to do is just tap to get these features. And then you can change the saturation, the brightness, and that's it. That's how we can animate colors, or brightness, or saturation. Now, let me take you to the second method, which I find to be just amusing. Are you ready? Hold on to your Apple Pencils. You're about to see something fascinating. You click on the action trigger, you go to filter, and business as usual, HSB, hue, saturation, and brightness. Now, if you've watched my very first video, I demonstrated the perform mode, and you can see here on the top left corner it's ready. What does that mean, Ihab? Well, behold, I'm gonna be changing the brightness as it plays through the timeline. This is just pure joy. Keep in mind that the finding out exactly the timing that you want to create animation really requires experience, requires practice and all this. But sometimes, and this is one of the cool things about the perform, is like as you're kind of playing along, actually you can just keep going because it would automatically zoom out. So in many cases, we have in our mind how the animation is supposed to play the way we want it, right? But the thing is to kind of really nail down or proactively plan out the keyframes and how everything is going to be playing. It's kind of daunting, kind of like scary because it requires some planning and it needs to be accurate and all this. And by the way, if you have exceeded the timeline, that's fine. You can just split cut it later and just deal with it. And also, if you want to go all the way back, you just throw it all the way. What I was saying is that in many cases, you know exactly how the animation is supposed to be playing, but you may lack that kind of experience with animation, or you don't even want to go through the process of keying things. Even animators hate that sometimes. I know it as an animator. So the power of this tool is that it would allow you to play it by ear. Here's something else that I noticed recently in my experiments. And this is something I wasn't aware of when I created the vehicle rigging animation. But as you know, it's still new software and we're learning. If you are on the perform mode, you would notice that sometimes the animation doesn't get picked up precisely as you're moving the effect. If you click on modify, it has this process of motion filtering, meaning that if you wanted to pick on every little tiny movement, you take it all the way to 0. It doesn't filter out, it does not simplify. And remember something I mentioned on my vehicle rigging, there is a way that you can really make the recording to take place more often by pausing as you're doing the perform movement. So with that said, let me just kind of tap 4 fingers and let's see what we have. I also want to mention that as you're playing the timeline, when you are on the full view, you see the bar, the red bar on the top. You click and hold with the pen or your finger and you can just move it forward or backward. So now I'm gonna play it and you can see that kind of glowing effect. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.